I'm lucky because on the ground I have 2 or 3 UNICEF staff. One of them is this young warlord who is working for Puntland, and this country has the largest number of youth-led organisations, believe it, in the world. They have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of groups that young people have created their own little organisation. And so we've just tapped into all of those groups. Yeah. And again, that's what ABCD is not about coming in with a whole pile of new stuff. It's actually about using what's there. So instead of creating a new structure, we use the structures there. And I suggest that's one of the things yesterday people shared with me that, you've got block leaders and you've got women's leaders there, you've got youth leaders and you've got different groups. Part of it is how do you use all of that thing, rather than coming in and setting up yet another whole new structure, how do you build upon what's there? And that's what we've done there. So these young people have come out of these youth-created organisations. But their passion is just unbelievable. I've never worked with a more passionate and more, I think, dynamic group of young people anywhere in the world.
Unbelievable that you go through it very smoothly.
Yeah, sorry?
It is unbelievable that you can go through very smoothly.
Yeah.
You will be a different scenario, I think so.
Yeah, I think so. The other, sorry.
One thing that we understand is that one advantage here is that the youth here have got some youth, they have been a part of groups and they have been leaders.
Yep.
But I do understand that over here, the people who we may be getting in would not have had that experience yet. So
Sure.
in your idea, what kind of criteria do we need to look into? We're looking at probably fresh people who have never gone into these kind of things before.
Sure. Well, I think it's more challenging. I mean, one thing is that you do, I think you're talking about the 30 young people that you're training as you change agents, is that right?
Yes.
I think the more, if those young people come from these settlements to start with, so they actually have an understanding of that world, rather than being urban educated young people who have never been to the place. I mean, the more you can find young people who have an attachment to that area, I think the better. And the number one characteristic is passion. We have an expression in Australia: without passion, you're stuffed. You will never achieve anything if you're not passionate. Enthusiasm is by far. So the one thing is, and what amazes me is I find people trying to do this stuff who have had a charisma bypass at some stage in their life, and there's no passion, there's no enthusiasm. They'll never excite anyone. What you need is young people, and you can see from their smiles, and I'm terrified because I know the government is incapable of delivering everything we're telling them. These young people are saying we want to get involved in the delivery, And I think that's what you need. You need passion, and you need people who've got a sense of commitment. Don't take on people who just want a job. Take on people who really see that this is probably going to be one of the most exciting experiences they could ever do in their life. That's probably the starting point. We can talk more about that into the afternoon, about the group. The other group that I'm working with, this is the poorest country though in Asia Pacific, and it's called Timor-Leste, or East Timor. As you're aware, it was under the Portuguese for a long time. The Indonesians controlled it. Out of 1 million people under Indonesian control, 200,000 lost their lives. So here's a country in the last 25 years who lost 20% of their population under an invading army. Incredible. Now, how do you rebuild that? And we are particularly working in the second biggest town called Bacau, and we're working in a village called Traloka, which is one of the poorest. It was particularly a place that suffered when the Indonesians pulled out. They actually ransacked the place. They actually destroyed a lot of the infrastructure and whatever. And so here is the poorest country trying to rebuild. And this is the group that we particularly want to do something with. And the way I'm doing it is bringing in teams of young Australians who now work alongside young East Timorese. And what we're doing is saying, what do both of us bring to the table? Not just Westerners who've got resources and affluent educated, but how do we get the two starting to say, what do we each bring? And it's an amazing project that we're actually working on. And the final example I'll give you is, this is a program I'm doing in Australia called BEAR, Business Expansion Retention Program, and it's where we've trained ordinary people, including 1/3 of our 60 volunteers are young students, to go out and be able to administer what we call a structured interview questionnaire. And we'll talk about that as a tool this afternoon. And they go out and talk to their business community about what is it like to run a business in our town, what helps you, what hinders you, and what good ideas have you got to make this a better place to run a business. And out of that we develop a whole action strategy. Again, what I love about it is because we've engaged local people in the process, 70 volunteers and probably 140 business people, they are keen to make it all happen. When we celebrate this, over 200 people turned up for the party to launch the strategy. They all have an investment in wanting to make it happen. Why? Because they took time out to be part of it. They were involved in at least 6 of these structured interviews, which take about an hour and a half, where they sat around the table with a business person and talked about what it's like to run a business. And it's the most exciting initiative. And again, there's a whole pile of tools there, and I'll leave you a handbook each on this particular program. There's things we can learn there. So I just give you that. That's my background. These are the things that I'm just engaged in, so you know where I'm coming from. But I want to begin with a Sufi story. Do people know what a Sufi story is? Sufi story is an Asian concept. It comes out of India, and it really is about a story that has meaning. And this particular Sufi story all relates to a group in a community who had a problem, and they felt the answer was to bring an expert from another country to tell them what to do. And so this community had heard about what this guy had been doing and said, we need him. He has the answers for us. So they organised to get this person to come and visit their particular village. They spent months organising the visit. They raised money to make it happen. There were transport costs involved. And the day arrived when the expert turned up, and the whole village gathered in the town hall. And the expert began with a question. Do you know what I'm going to tell you? Do you know what I'm going to tell you? And they all looked at him like you're looking at me. And they all eventually muttered, no. And he looked back and said, well, if you don't know what I'm going to tell you, there's no purpose in me being here. Thank you for the invitation. Goodbye. I'm leaving. And walks out the door and goes home. But you can imagine how shocked this group were. They'd gone to a lot of trouble to organise to get this expert there, and he gave them that crap. What made it worse is over the next 3 months, things only got worse, not better in the village. And people thought, you know, we mustn't have been hospitable enough. Maybe we didn't brief him, but we know he has the answers. We need to get him back. So they go to a lot of trouble, and again, the expert turns up. And again, he gathers in front of the group and he begins with the same question. Do you know what I'm going to tell you? Now the people remembered what happened last time. So this time they say, yes. To which he says, well, now you know what to do. There's no purpose in me being here. Thank you very much. Goodbye, I'm leaving. And they walk out the door and go home. He goes home. Things do not get better though. And people are